Karen Redd and Boston police officer John O'Keefe had been in a relationship for several years. Friends described them as a couple with both happy moments and difficult challenges, but no one could have imagined how one cold January night would change their lives forever. On the evening of January 28, 2022, the two spent time with friends at local bars before heading toward a house party in Canton, Massachusetts. It seemed like an ordinary winter night, until everything suddenly took a tragic turn. According to prosecutors, Karen Redd dropped John O'Keefe off outside the home shortly after midnight. They allege that during an argument, she struck him with her SUV while reversing and then drove away, leaving him alone in freezing temperatures. Hours later, O'Keefe was discovered unresponsive in the snow outside the same house. Despite emergency efforts, he was pronounced dead. The shocking death of a respected Boston police officer immediately triggered a major homicide investigation and attracted widespread media attention. But almost from the beginning, the defense told a very different story. Karen Redd's attorneys argued that John O'Keefe was never hit by her vehicle. Instead, they claimed he entered the house, where something happened that investigators failed to properly examine. According to the defense, the investigation focused on Karen too quickly while overlooking other possibilities. As this competing narrative gained attention, public opinion became sharply divided. Then came another unexpected twist. During the investigation, and later in court, text messages exchanged between key individuals involved in the case became a major focus. Those messages raised questions about relationships between witnesses, investigative decisions, and whether the investigation had been conducted fairly. Suddenly, the case was no longer only about what happened on that snowy night. It was also about whether every piece of evidence had been handled without bias. With two completely different versions of the same night now standing before the court, one question continued to dominate headlines across America. Would the evidence prove Karen Redd was responsible for John O'Keefe's death, or would the controversial text messages reshape the entire case before the jury reached its decision? As investigators began piecing together the events of that snowy night, they believed the physical evidence pointed in one direction. Prosecutors argued that Karen Redd's SUV struck John O'Keefe outside the house before she drove away, leaving him in the freezing cold. They pointed to vehicle damage, forensic findings, and witness statements as key parts of the timeline. From their perspective, the evidence formed a clear sequence of events that ultimately led to O'Keefe's death. But the defense saw the investigation very differently. Karen Redd's attorneys claimed detectives focused on one suspect from the very beginning, instead of fully exploring every possible explanation. They argued that important leads were overlooked and that investigators failed to properly examine what may have happened inside the home where the party was taking place. As more court documents became public, the case quickly evolved from a murder prosecution into a broader debate about the integrity of the investigation itself. Then came one of the trial's most controversial pieces of evidence: text messages exchanged between people connected to the investigation. During court proceedings, these messages became a major point of discussion as the defense questioned the actions and judgment of certain individuals involved in the case. While prosecutors maintained that the texts did not change the core evidence, the defense argued they revealed potential bias and raised serious questions about how the investigation had been conducted. Suddenly, the courtroom was no longer focused only on what happened to John O'Keefe. It was also asking a second, equally important question. Could the jury fully trust the investigation that brought Karen Redd to trial? That question would soon become one of the most fiercely debated issues inside the courtroom. As the trial moved deeper into the courtroom, every day brought new testimony, new questions, and growing public attention. Reporters packed the courthouse, legal analysts debated every witness, and millions of people followed each development online. But more than anything else, one piece of evidence kept returning to the center of the conversation: the text messages. During the trial, prosecutors continued to argue that the physical evidence and witness testimony supported their conclusion that Karen Redd was responsible for John O'Keefe's death. They maintained that the investigation had uncovered a consistent timeline and that the evidence pointed to a single conclusion. Their goal was to convince the jury that, when viewed together, the facts told a clear and reliable story. The defense, however, focused heavily on the communications between people connected to the investigation. They argued that certain text messages raised important questions about the conduct of key individuals and whether the investigation had been handled with complete fairness. Through detailed cross-examinations, defense attorneys highlighted inconsistencies, challenged witness credibility, and urged jurors to closely examine not only the evidence itself, but also how that evidence had been collected and interpreted. With every witness who stepped off the stand, the courtroom became more divided. Supporters of the prosecution believed the evidence was overwhelming, while supporters of the defense argued that too many questions remained unanswered. As closing arguments approached, the tension reached its highest point. The jury now faced a difficult task, carefully weighing months of testimony, forensic evidence, and those controversial text messages before deciding which version of the story they believed. As the courtroom proceedings continued, it became clear that this was no longer just another criminal case. The Karen Read trial had evolved into a national conversation about evidence, investigative practices, and the justice system itself. Every hearing brought fresh analysis, and every new court filing sparked another wave of discussion across television, podcasts, YouTube, and social media. Millions of people weren't simply waiting for a verdict. They were trying to understand which version of the story deserved to be believed. One reason the case attracted so much attention was the sharp contrast between the prosecution and the defense. Prosecutors argued that the physical and forensic evidence supported their case against Karen Read. The defense, on the other hand, insisted that the investigation left too many unanswered questions and challenged the reliability of key aspects of the evidence. The disputed text messages became a powerful symbol of that debate, with each side interpreting them in a completely different way. Regardless of where public opinion falls, the Karen Read trial demonstrates how modern criminal investigations can become the subject of intense national scrutiny. Every piece of digital evidence, every witness statement, and every courtroom ruling is examined not only by lawyers and jurors, but also by millions of viewers following the case in real time. That level of attention is rare, even in high-profile murder trials. As the legal process continues, many questions remain unresolved in the minds of the public. The courtroom will ultimately decide the legal outcome, but the debate surrounding this case is likely to continue long after the proceedings end. And with each new hearing and each new development, one thing remains certain: the Karen Read trial is far from being forgotten, and America will continue watching every step of the story.